Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining this session on artificial intelligence. Today, we have 4 speakers from 4 EIT innovation communities who will present the main findings of the newly launched report on artificial intelligence. And then they will guide us through general and sector-specific recommendations, and they will also explain what opportunities we have in Europe for further deployment of AI. They will also tell us how Europe shall deal with AI and what's the impact on health, mobility, and manufacturing. And also they will tell us what policy options we have. And before starting, please allow me to introduce the speakers. So we will have Jan-Philipp Beck, the CEO of EIT Health, Willem Jonker, the CEO of EIT Digital, Klaus Beetz, the CEO of EIT Manufacturing, and Gareth McNaughton, the Innovation Director of EIT Urban Mobility. At the end of the session, we will have the opportunity to go through some of your questions. Please submit them through all over the session through Slido. Once you log in Slido, you have to type #RI20 and select hub number 9 to make sure that you can pose your questions. So this is the intro, and please allow me to give the floor to the first speaker, Willem Jonker, the CEO of EIT Digital. And please put his slide on screen, if possible. Willem, the floor is yours.
Federico, thank you very much. Audience, a pleasure to be with you. And indeed, I will show you a few slides. And according to those slides, I will then discuss the content of the report that you see listed on this first slide, a European approach to artificial intelligence, a policy perspective that we produced with the colleagues of EIT that are around the table, being the Climate, Urban Mobility, Manufacturing and Health KICs. If we go to the next slide, briefly, what KICs are doing. This is the example of EIT Digital, but similar slides can be made for all of the KICs. We're about creating innovations. That means startups, standing up, starting up, growing them up, launching products. But we're also very much about education, making sure we have graduates with an entrepreneurial mindset and that work in the areas that are very vital for Europe. Like we have here around the table, digital, health, manufacturing, urban mobility. If we go to the next slide, you see roughly how the EIT community works. It really works from a trusted ecosystem all across Europe, and it really delivers along 2 pillars. One pillar is the innovation and entrepreneurship, where the products, the ventures, the scale-ups come from. And the other part is, of course, our education programs where the entrepreneurial talent is brought to Europe, but also where there is a lot of skills focused work going on. And the 2 reinforce each other, because if you create new companies, you need people to really work in those companies and get the entrepreneurial spirit in, but also for the existing companies. We need the talent that drives, in this case, the digital transformation or the health transformation or the manufacturing transformation or the urban mobility. So that's for setting the scene. If we now go to the next slide, we will focus on the topic of AI in Europe. The feeling we have in Europe that is when it comes to AI, the US, but also Asia is really quite advanced when it comes to applying AI technologies to all kinds of products and services. If you look at the research setting, Europe is on par with what you see in the other continents. If you see at the application, you see especially that the US is quite far ahead, but also in Asia, you see countries being extremely far ahead. And Europe has to provide its answer based on what we as Europeans want to do with AI. Because AI can bring a lot, but AI also brings certain questions to the table, certain challenges. What you see here is the work that is currently going on. It's the white paper on AI, and it gives a very high level outline on what you could say. On the one hand, we need to build an ecosystem where we can thrive the creation of products and services based on AI. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that AI is trusted by our citizens, and that we have the ethics that we are in Europe supporting, and the values that we have, our European values of inclusive, of AI being a help to people, that is well embedded. If we go to the next slide, you see how the policy report is built. It is built on a so-called scenario-based approach. So our position is not it's good or bad. Our position is, look, there are different scenarios where AI can develop, and those scenarios have their own characteristics. And if you develop AI in those directions, this is the kind of situation you will end up in. And then it's to the policymakers to say which of the policy instruments they will use in which way. And scenario-based approach always take the main axes that are key for the application. And what you see here is that the main axis that we have arrived at is, on the one hand, is AI taken in a general way across the board, no matter which specific application area you're looking at, yes or no? And the other one is, how strong do you want to regulate AI? And if you work out on those 4 segments that you see, you can get either in a situation which we call dystopian, where you have a very firm, across the board approach to AI. And you will see that if you do that, then you have one size fits all. But that means that you have the common denominator, and that you may have in certain areas severe restrictions which hinder innovation in those areas, because you inherit the general restrictions that are in a firm approach towards regulation. If you go to the upside, on the right, then you see that we have a ultra social approach. What you do there is actually you still are very firm. However, you differentiate in specific areas. You say the way I treat personal data in healthcare is a different way than treating this machine data in an industry environment, for example. So that are the scenarios that you see here. What we then did is we ranked those scenarios based on a couple of values that we want to support. And those values are fairness, innovation, capability, trust, capability, and growth capability. And innovation and growth are really different things, because you can have scenarios where incumbent players are much favorized, and so they can grow, but then the growth is not very, very evenly spread. Of course, when you have innovation promotion, then everybody has a chance, and you get all kind of new developments as well. If you go to the next slide, you see that what we do in this report, we look at a couple of policy levers. I'm not expecting you to read this slide. It would be more a kind of eye test. But I want to highlight a couple of things that are very important at a general level. Of course, when you talk about AI, you talk about data. How do you handle the data? How do you also make sure, and that's a European challenge, that you can have enough data available and you are not limited to small data sets, and as a result from that cannot compete with countries that have, like the US or China, enormous access to data. Interoperability is another topic is about organization. How do you organize yourself in a flexible way with respect to liabilities, for example, on AI applications? If you have high liabilities, people are not very keen on experimenting, and as a result, you hinder innovation and introduction. Human capital, of course, has many angles. It has the angle of, hey, labor being replaced by machines, human labor being replaced by machines. Human capital also has the angle of learning, getting the skills that you need. Trust, of course, a very important topic. And finally, markets. In the remainder of the slides, which I would like to skip, and I would like to now go to the conclusions, because the remaining slides are addressing the specificities of the different areas we have around the table, and they will be covered by my colleagues. So if you now go to the conclusions of the report, you see that we have 4 strong recommendations. First of all, our conclusion from the evaluation of the scenarios is that you should act on the right-hand side of the playing field, in the side where you do take context, application domain, specific regulation, and you do not try to find one size takes it all. Another one is that if you look at the application of AI on personal data, you really should have different policies than when applying it on machine data, because the sensitivity, the privacy aspects are much different for those 2 classes of data. Another important element in AI, where AI goes above data regulation, is the transparency of the algorithms used themselves. So the way the data is treated, and also explainability. Can we explain what has been done? And finally, what you should make sure is that you have a strong embedding of the European values in your regulations, and you do not leave it to scenarios where it is completely the own responsibility of actors to take care. I just finished my part of my contribution here. Going to the last slide, you see the link where you can download the report that we produced, and I'm very happy to give there you see the download link. I'm very happy to give the floor back to Federico so that my colleagues from the other KICs can bring their contributions. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Willem. And indeed, after this general introduction, we can go now and address the concerns and opportunities in the various sectors. And the first one I'd like to invite to speak is Jan-Philippe Beck, CEO of EIT Health, who will present the work that EIT Health is doing in this area, and will also explain the main findings on his side. Jan-Philippe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Federico. Fantastic. Let's kick it off. Just very few words about EIT Health. I think Willem has said it all, what KICs are about. So in our case, it's of course propelling and developing innovation to improve people's lives in Europe and around the globe. We have now 150 partners in the community that work towards this aim. In the ecosystem, around 750 startups that are, of course, also very, very important contributors and targets of our work. If we don't know if we can see the slides, but I also want to show you briefly what we are quite proud of in terms of our geographical footprint now. We are strongly embedded. We're strongly embedded in key innovation hubs in Europe, in total 6 of them, but we place a lot of emphasis also on wider outreach. So we have our InnoStars networks and then the regional innovation scheme, where we have created now more than 14 hubs reaching out to various areas in Europe to engage them in health innovation and also support the uptake and deployment of innovation in those areas. So about AI, there is, of course, without any doubt, enormous potential in healthcare. And I would like to draw your attention to 3 pieces of work that we have done. There is so much, there's so much going on at the project level, and of course also solutions being put forward through the startups that we are supporting, that we felt it was pertinent to actually dive deeper into the cross-cutting issues around AI. And all of the things that we have done, I would say, over the last 12 months, they very well complement and reflect what has also been presented by Willem now in the joint work. So 3 areas that we have particularly focused on over the last 12 months, I would say. One is what was already mentioned by Willem is to actually put the principles in terms of AI and ethics that the high-level group had developed, put it to the test. So we simply went out to our community, innovators, startups, researchers, and says, okay, so are you actually aware, and how far are these relevant to your work, and how would you actually translate them or have done that already? So that's number one. I'll come to the findings in a second. The second piece, second report that we did was very extensive work undertaken together in partnership with McKinsey Global Institute, very fruitful collaboration, but we wanted now to take the healthcare providers in focus, and actually the practitioners, the people that work in healthcare, and understand how do they see AI's potential, but also how they see it transforming the sector and the implications. So this was the second step. And then the third one that we put quite some emphasis on was to contribute to the debate at European level. As it has already been mentioned, the AI white paper has been put forward, as well as the data strategy, and we have gathered a group from the community, what we call the consultative group, to input very concretely on what we think should be addressed. And these views have, as always, been informed from the work that we do, let's say, on the ground, if you wish, right? So if we jump to the next slide, just some key conclusions that resonate also very, very well, of course, with the with what we have done in the joint report with all the KICs. So first of all, of course, rapid progress is being made and has even been accelerated, I would say, and now during the COVID crisis. Our research also shows that extremely high priority in the space of ethics and AI is given to privacy. That's very important. Data governance, we will come back to that, and technical robustness and safety. And I think also issues connected to that, such as liability and risk. Now, when we look into what did health care professionals, practitioners tell us, then what's really right front and center there is the enormous need for building skills, and also building up, of course, skilled workforce. So by 2030, the need for skilled personnel in healthcare will dramatically increase as the sector also grows, connected to the global trends that we have in aging and so on. But we will also need to make sure that the digital skills that the professionals have will dramatically increase, so that they, of course, can also make use of the solutions that we're talking about here, and then spend more time actually on patients. And then finally, one learning or key learning also from the healthcare providers is that there is still limited expertise when it comes to actually deploying and scaling AI-enabled solutions. And there are also challenges then resulting from that when it comes to, for example, executing robust procurement processes maybe, and making sure that within those, for example, good attention is paid to established standards that can support interoperability. And finally, as I mentioned before, I think there is a great still insecurity around the regulatory environment and how it is evolving. This is something I think that needs to be addressed in order to give innovators also confidence and make Europe a place where AI will be developed and, of course, also deployed. Now, some of the three key conclusions, if we want to move to the next, slide. So three areas that we see are of particular relevance to be addressed now, and where Europe also should play a leading role. And recognizing, of course, that there is a lot of excitement in the community about utilizing AI in healthcare. One is around data regulation. I just pick out two pieces. I think in the domain of common standards, a lot has actually been done, also with European support. A lot has been done. It's very much, I think, about implementing those standards and paying attention, as I said before, that standards are also becoming a key element when you procure. This is I think of critical importance. And then talking about data regulation and security, I think that GDPR has, of course, put a very important framework in place. But what we found out in the exercise with the consultative group on data strategy and the AI white paper was that, of course, there's heterogeneity amongst the member states when it comes to application, and key terms just also need clearer definition and guidance, such as such as public interests or scientific research. Things like this need to be clarified. And funding, very short. I mean, as Horizon Europe is emerging, I think there's a great opportunity. I believe we should see that also funding can be concentrated in sort of lighthouses where we might also make investments in actually cleaning, preparing larger data sets to actually really show how then AI can deliver value to patients and citizens. So concentrate on key priorities and areas and deploy larger scale projects. And finally, in the area of talent, I said it before, we need to work at all fronts. Update curricula is important, but also invest in the upskilling of current healthcare workforce. And then finally, just to conclude, I think on a positive note, on a challenging topic, I think as much hardship and problems COVID-19 has, of course, all caused us, both on the health side as well as on the economic side. There are maybe some positive elements that we can draw, and maybe things that give us also reason to have positive outlook. I think that the healthcare sector may come out in the end better for two reasons. One is, I think we have now seen rapidly under pressure, of course, also what's possible. We have deployed a few projects where algorithms were applied to existing large data sets, and we could actually show that mortality could be reduced because you were stratifying patients better and faster. So these examples are extremely important to also get acceptance in the community of clinicians. And secondly, think now as digitalization is accelerated, we have an enormous window of opportunity to increase the acceptance among citizens and patients for the deployment of such solutions. This is an enormous chance that we can take. And I believe that if we create the right environment, also on the policy side now, we can really make leaps forward to ultimately make Europe a strong place where AI-driven innovation thrives for the benefit of patients and citizens. I conclude here, and I'm happy to engage in the discussion and take your questions later. Thank you very much. Back to you, Federico.
Thanks a lot, Jan-Philipp. Indeed, very interesting. Indeed, don't forget to ask questions via Slido. As I said, hashtag RI20 and then select hub number 9. Okay, so after the healthcare sector, another sector which has strong potential in Europe and strong opportunities for AI in Europe, as well as challenges, is the manufacturing one. And I'd like to give the floor now to Klaus Beeth, the CEO of EIT Manufacturing. Klaus, the floor is yours. Please bring the slides on screen.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Federico, for the introduction, and also thanks a lot for the invitation to have the possibility here to reflect a little bit on the importance of AI within the manufacturing sector. Maybe we can go to the first slide, because really manufacturing matters. Can we switch to the next slide? Really, manufacturing matters. We have more than 2 million enterprises active in the manufacturing sector in Europe, employing more than 32 million jobs. And every citizen, every person is daily in our daily life is concerned with manufacturing, because all the things around us, the furniture, the buildings, the food on the plate itself, all is the result of manufacturing. So manufacturing really matters, and we are here as a new KIC, and we want to support. We maybe can switch to the next slide. We are here to support Europe's industry to becoming greener, more digital, while remaining competitive on a global scale. And artificial intelligence really falls in the topic of digitalization, where we are focusing on. And you can look on these three buzzwords as challenges or as opportunities. I like to see more the opportunities in all the three topics here. But anyway, what is for sure? We will be only successful in exploiting AI if we get the more than 2 million European companies on board and support their journey towards the digital economy, towards the circular economy and the decarbonization of industry, and towards increasing their competitiveness. And this is what EIT Manufacturing is aiming for. And maybe we can switch the next slide on our partnership according to the time, and can go immediately to the next slide. Willem Jonker already mentioned the base for artificial intelligence is data. And if we look at the data we are dealing with in an industrial environment, in manufacturing, these are complete different data from natural language processing or determining the shopping behavior of a human being. Here we are talking about the movement, the acceleration of mechanical parts, of vibration of mechanical parts, of temperature and heat transfer in different kind of materials, of magnetic and electronic fields, of noise and sound, of fluid dynamics. Let me focus a bit on noise and sound, because this remembers me always on my youth when I had my first car. I was a student, I was short of money. So it was an old car, a used car. And always when I'm driving, I had to listen to the sound of the engine, of the gears, if there is something strange. And unfortunately, very often there was a strange noise. And I had to react in order that the car not completely get out of order. So this is exactly what we are doing in an industrial environment. We know how the sound of a healthy engine looks like, and we can compare it online, and we can detect deviations. But for all of that, you need really quite sound mathematical tools and mathematical modeling. And this is the kind of data we are dealing with to a large part in an industrial environment and in manufacturing. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Therefore, if we look at this high-level system design for the digital age, artificial intelligence has to go hand in hand with mathematical modeling and simulation. Then we can really gain all the benefits when we use artificial intelligence algorithms in the smart products. And smart products means not only to enhance the feature set by digital means, it means also to make the product more environmental friendly, to reduce the energy consumption, to minimize the waste. And the same for the digitalization of plants and factories, of complete value chains. And here, one of the lessons learned of the COVID crisis will be that we have to reshape our worldwide distributed, quite complex value chains. So here also artificial intelligence can play an important role when it will be combined with mathematical modeling and simulation. In these two parts, we are still talking about the digitalization of the traditional industry. When we go to smart services and develop innovative digital business models based on the data we collect around the design and the engineering, the production and the usage of products, then we are in the digital economy. And also here we see a big potential for artificial intelligence. And let me switch to the next slide to show you two examples. We are a relatively new KIC. We started our operation the 1st of January. So I will show you two examples of initiatives we initiated this year dealing with data and with artificial intelligence. The first one is the manufacturing data space. Here we brought together a couple of industry partners out of our partnership, and with the goal to build a model for sharing data between industry partners that are in different stages of the value chain. So the sharing of the data, and once we have the shared data from different partners, from different industries, from different stages in the value chain, we can exploit it via artificial intelligence. And here we will align with other European initiatives. So we are currently negotiating with the Big Data Value Association a memorandum of collaboration. And as a first use case for the shared data, we have chosen the decarbonization. So how can the sharing of data and the exploiting of data with artificial intelligence contribute to the decarbonization of industry? This is the one example I want to show. And the second example, if we can go to the next slide. This is a joint project, a project with our sister KICs, with food and with digital. And here we deploy and identify IA use cases on fully digitalized production beds in the food production. And we are having already first results and identified very interesting use cases, and will implement AI-based solutions for these use cases. And we as EIT Manufacturing, we will then take care via cross-fertilization to bring the benefits also to other industries within the manufacturing arena. So this is a very, very promising project from the first results. But we have also done some survey with the European SMEs, especially the food SMEs, but also all manufacturing SMEs. And we see that 50% of the European manufacturing SMEs think they are missing out on AI. So we have to help them. So manufacturing, to sum up, inherits a huge potential for AI, but especially SMEs faces a lot of difficulties approaching the subject, and we have to support them. Europe has always been the home of industry and a pioneer in industrial innovation. And we are aiming for that also in the exploitation of artificial intelligence. This will be no exception. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Klaus. Very interesting. We now move to another sector, which is mobility. We mentioned it in the beginning, but we are addressing these 4 sectors. So I'm pleased to welcome Gareth McNaughton, the Director of Innovation of EIT Urban Mobility. Gareth, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to be a participant in the last few months working with the other EITs on how we can cooperate on artificial intelligence and the direction we need to take. From our side, we are also quite young. We're new. We've been around this is our first full year of operation. And we're lucky enough to already have some AI projects within our portfolio. But if we come back to one of the challenges we face as EIT Urban Mobility is to create livable cities on a scale that people's experience of urban life is improved, which means we address questions such as noise reduction in travel, pollution in travel, accessibility to travel, and ensuring that we can reduce the carbon footprint across our cities. So we've quite a few challenges we're trying to do, and it's a little different from some of the other EIT in the sense of we are a capillary point where an average citizen will interact with our services, okay, consistently. And so it changes some of the ways we look at AI. For example, we have very smart infrastructure that's being built and implemented. And on top of that, we have very smart vehicles that are being designed. But then we have perhaps unsmart human beings. And when we're trying to create a system in which AI can function properly, we have to consider that dumb infrastructure and dumb individuals who choose not to engage or have different ways of engaging. So we see there's a huge business model challenge, but at the same time, there's a trust model challenge. And we have to address both of them. So if we go to the next slide, we were able to highlight some of the typical use, which is the mobility model as it currently is, mass transit, volumes of people in very short spaces of time moving through cities. Secondly, mobility as a service, the ability to redesign services and to tailor services to people wherever they go in Europe. So it's a common way of operating, a common way of accessing services, paying for services, understanding services. And thirdly, very much a demand response system. Okay. Now, we're in a user position. If we stand back and look at that, our data is constantly being used, and we're not really aware of how our data is being used. And that sort of a black box situation that we're facing is a challenge. We have an obligation for universal service provision. And a universal service provision is not necessarily in the interest of some of our world-leading urban mobility companies and their AI algorithms. Okay? That's not their principles. That's not their value. They want to make money. So when we're trying to go through our typical use cases for AI, we are finding there is a tension that's underlying our discussions between perhaps the city that owns the concession and the legal obligation. The innovators are actually moving things forward fast, and the citizens and their understanding of what's happening to them and who's responsible for that. So what we're looking at, if we just come to the next slide, we'll quickly show a little bit of that tension. Thank you. Next slide. There we go. So if we look at the middle column here, this is the robotisation of logistics. We have, as part of our urban mobility, an obligation to look at things like bin delivery, package delivery. And we're seeing huge developments there, both on how we respond to our needs. We have got COVID situation, which we've seen massive volumes of home delivery increasing. But we're seeing that some of the clever companies that we look at with admiration, using artificial intelligence and extending their patterns, they're not making any money. Some of these companies that you've heard recently are incredible increases in the delivery demand are actually laying off people in their headquarters because their business model has never made any money. And having higher volumes of use is actually burning through their capital at a higher rate. So while we have very innovative people who are making things happen in urban mobility, logistics and delivery, it's not necessarily really working yet. Okay, so we've got a big challenge on that. We're keenly working on autonomous trucks. The idea of drones have been presented with new projects for us, but we're currently looking at those basic companies that are existing and extending their capacity to move from one area of the business model into others, and seeing if we can bring them in to the EIT Urban Mobility family. We know that going aggressively against them on regulation policy is probably not the best for Europe or best for the business models, but coming closer and having that transparent discussion to diffuse the tension is somewhere we want to go. On the traffic management and operations side, this is where the people come into the equation, their daily experiences, the cleanliness of the environments, the ability to have personalized services, the tracking of where the current vehicles are. And importantly, we used to have a really huge emphasis on shared mobility. As you can imagine, under COVID right now, some of that sharedness is sort of a died off. And we're looking at the idea of trusted bubbles of people sharing the same car and how we can adapt some of these very highly invested by private companies and car companies to shared mobility into a different model. But as we're looking at all of these things, the tension comes back to us is we have one platform we're trying to do, but we have multiple providers. They all have a level of discomfort in transparency of what exactly their algorithm does, what values it has, and how we actually bring them together to share the data in confidence and make a better public service. At this point in time, we've been trying some workarounds. Some of our cities are really being clever because there's data gaps. And when there's data gaps, some of our algorithms will never be of use. Okay? So there were some clever workarounds using telecommunication data. and inferring people's movements and the type of movements and the way they move. And that can all be done from via telephone passively. Is it the optimal answer? Probably not. Do we want to come in and try and enforce new law? That may be an option, or we could try the nudge. To tell the truth, we've been trying the nudge for a while. So what we're looking at now, Ursula von der Leyen, in her recent State of the Union address, came up with something that made our heart leap, when she turned around and talked about a secure European ID, in which we would be able to understand who was having our data and how it was being used, and how, naturally, what way it was being used by businesses to be able to categorize it and decide. The case that we're looking for example, is we have variable pricing on some of our urban mobility solutions from private companies. And that sounds great. It might be a cheaper service, it might be a more expensive service. But what's happening in those algorithms? If your postcode is not well seen and it's a lower socioeconomic, we need to understand the pricing. Is the pricing higher because there's not a car in the area? Is the pricing higher because it's a risky neighborhood? And we don't know. And that's something that we can't let continue in Europe. We have an obligation for inclusive cities that service the elderly and all communities of socioeconomic status. And we don't know. So we'll be trying to bring these people together with us over the next year or two, having increased programs on artificial intelligence in applied ways. And we hope in the near future we'll have a further cooperation that we'll be able to do with some well-known household names. And we'll be looking forward to that for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth.
Federico?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. We have 4 minutes left, so I'd like to go through 2 questions that we received. We received many. Unfortunately, we cannot answer all of them. And I'm asking now the organizers to put on screen the first question, please. Okay, I don't know. While they are publishing it, I will ask it. It's for Willem Jonker. The first question is, we are working to make AI technologies more accessible, transparent, and fair. To what extent is this possible and useful, and what role could KICs play? Please keep the answer to 1.5 minutes, so we have time for another question. Thanks a lot.
I think the wrong question is on the table, because I see EIT Health, but I think I understood what you said. The question was about fairness and transparency of the algorithms, if I understood correctly. So, correct. Of course, what you see with AI is, as you see with human being decision making, that there is gradually built up a kind of beliefs based on which you make your decisions. And algorithms trained with specific data are, of course, extracting a model from it that encodes certain beliefs. So it's very important that these beliefs are made visible. You can see it, of course, in the behavior, but we need to model that, because we should not assume that algorithms are purely neutral, only factual. No, not at all. They are based on specific data. If the specific data has kind of implicit perceptions in it, then the algorithm will be trained like that and have that. So it's not only about having the code, it's also about making sure that we have the conceptual model that allows us to understand the beliefs of the algorithm. Because there are examples emerging where algorithms are discriminating based on the information they are trained on, or algorithms are extracting certain features that are in the end not essential for the functioning of the algorithm, while we do not really notice that at first. So that is where this transparency is absolutely needed in order to have wide-scale deployment, and there should be supervision. So unsupervised artificial intelligence is something that should be applied in very restricted areas in order to avoid bias going into the algorithms.
Thank you, Willem. Jan-Philipp, the second question is for you. So how do we think we need to build upon the momentum and progress achieved in adopting AI in healthcare post-COVID-19?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Federico. Thanks to the audience for putting the question. Well, just a couple of reflections on this. So there's two things that have opened up there. One is we want to build on the trust that has been created among. So I think we're going to the second idea using. So trust in AI facilities is important, and that we build on the collaboration that we have shown between healthcare professionals and innovators for things at the right speed. And then hopefully we can inform policymakers with proper evidence to take the right policy decisions. I stop here because I think the session is somehow ending. Is that correct? Or
yeah, there was some music. I think. Thanks a lot, and we will follow up offline during the rest of the event. Thank you so much to all the speakers and to the audience for participating. Thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Federico.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.